Senate and the House are trying to put us, the people with disabilities, into a situation where we will end up in nursing homes where we will die. I'm semi-paralyzed. All I'm asking for is the right to live in freedom.
Protesters who gathered outside of Senator McConnell's office on Thursday, most of them didn't say, and you may have seen these dramatic images, most of them didn't say they were political activists. They didn't describe themselves as Obama allies. A lot of them said they were Americans who received their health care through Medicaid, and they said they want to be heard from before the Republican Congress makes these drastic cuts to Medicaid. Now, Michael Phillips could not protest outside of Senator McConnell's office, but he did send out this tweet that got a lot of notice saying, "Hi, my name is Michael Phillips. I live at home because of a Medicaid waiver. Don't cut Medicaid. Don't take away my home." Joining us now on The Last Word is Mike Phillips, who's living with a spinal muscular atrophy and who stands to lose Medicaid benefits under the potential Senate health care discussion bill. We're also joined by his mom, Karen Clay, who is his full-time caregiver. Thank you both, Karen and Mike, for being here. Starting with you, Karen, how do you see this issue and why was it important for both of you to speak out?
Thank you. When my son was diagnosed over 30 years ago, the doctors told me he wouldn't see his first birthday, and yet here he is. Over time, his needs have changed, and the amount of care that he's needed has increased. And that's what Medicaid is all about. Medicaid is called a lifeline, but for people like my son, Medicaid is a life. Through a Medicaid waiver, we are enabled to keep Mike at home and to care for him by a family who loves him and who knows his needs best. If you take away Medicaid from individuals like my son, and my son in particular, there would be no place for him. In the state of Florida, there are no facilities for individuals who cannot be weaned from a vent, which is how Mike breathes. He would be forced into an institution, not even here in the state of Florida, but somewhere else in the country. His other option, and we have seen other individuals with vents who have been in hospitals and had nowhere for them to go. And this is at an extreme cost. My son doesn't want to live at our local hospital. He doesn't want to be out of state in an institution. He wants to stay at home, and we want him to be at home. It's amazing that after all these years, I would have to fight to spend less money.
So, Karen, you're saying that the way this works, if there were the funding cuts and you didn't have that support and that waiver, it's not just reduced health care, which is significant. You're saying it might mean that you wouldn't be able to have Mike at home or care for him at home?
Yes, that's exactly what could happen.
And Mike, we read what you wrote on Twitter, and I understand that you've also written something else and you wanted to share it. So please go ahead so folks can hear from you.
Hi, and good evening. First, I just want to say it's an honor to be here. I watch your legal analysis every day. You're spectacular. So, ever since November the 9th, 2016, I haven't been sleeping well. I've been scared. I've never been scared by the results of an election. It's an odd feeling. I've always felt like the federal government exists to protect citizens, even when state governments won't do so. Maybe especially when state governments won't do so. So, yes, I'm scared. Scared of what could happen to me if Medicaid cut comes to pass in Florida. I'm scared because Florida is bent on doing so because they know the federal government won't stop them. Though I'm quite disabled, Medicaid services allow me to live a full, productive life, interacting with the community, being cared for at home. I live at home. I have a personal care assistant. She takes me anywhere I want to go. The movies, Starbucks, dinner with friends, the tattoo shop when the mood takes me, which is often enough. I don't have a girlfriend right now, but I had one for quite a while, and I'd like to give things another go. I'm a published writer. I help to develop assistive technology. I'm not exactly Ryan Gosling, but I lead a good life. Losing Medicaid, being forced into an institution, I'd lose everything. I'd lose the rights guaranteed to me under the Constitution, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. People with disabilities know happiness isn't guaranteed, but we want a shot at it just like anybody else.
Mike, thank you for sharing that. It's very eloquent. Karen, what else do you want people to know about this bill, about the battle ahead?
This bill is not just mean. This bill is cruel. This is not about replace and repeal the Affordable Care Act, because there is nothing in the Affordable Care Act that mentions block grants or per capita caps. Per capita caps would result in not only the $880 billion in cuts that we're looking at over the next 10 years, but it'll be far greater than money. It'll be loss of life. And that's why we're fighting, because we cannot believe that a bill that is this cruel could possibly be enacted by anyone.
Karen and Mike, I want you to stay with me. I mentioned, we were speaking with Andy Slavitt, who on the policy side has run this program. And Andy, I think you're still with us. As you listen to this and you think about the disability aspect, which we often hear about in terms of data, we hear the words. Walk us through how this program works nationally and how many people with disabilities and families are affected.
Well, there's nothing that I could say that would be more eloquent than what Karen and Mike just told you. But what I can tell you, having overseen the Medicaid program for 2 years, is that there's 10 million people living with disabilities in this country who are dependent upon the kinds of services that just allow them to not only lead a life that gives them the basics of their health care, but to lead a life of some fulfillment. And if you can imagine, if some of those services that Mike just talked about didn't come daily but came weekly, just imagine the kinds of cuts that would change his life, let alone the size of these cuts, which would eliminate in many, many states the possibility of the kind of waivers that Karen described to you. And Karen said something very important. These waivers are humane, they're what families want, they keep families together, but they're also very efficient. It's much better to keep people at home and take care of them in comfortable settings. So we have, I think, we're on the verge of making, I think, a mistake that in the real world will hurt millions of people like Mike, and I'm so glad Mike and Karen were able to come on and share their story.
Karen and Mike, stay with me here with Andy. Joan Walsh and Nancy Giles were here. We talk about politics a lot. We talk about policy a lot. Joan, you've been covering the healthcare battles for 7+ years. I wonder what you're thinking.
I'm thinking, what the hell kind of a country are we, Ari, that Michael has to lose sleep wondering if he can stay in his home with his family? I mean, what is this family supposed to do? Paul Ryan has been dreaming about cutting this program since he was hanging out at Keggers in college. He's told that story.
What kind of a man is he?
What kind of a monster is he? Who dreams of cutting Medicaid? They act like people are merely takers. They don't act like they understand hardship of any kind. Paul Ryan, who actually got Social Security as a survivor when his father died, God bless him. I mean, the cruelty, Karen uses that word, it's the only word we can use. The cruelty of this bill is beyond belief. And if Donald Trump is really going to go along with this, don't like the man, didn't vote for him, but he promised not to do this. There has to be a way to reach the consciences of multiple Republicans on this bill, and I think you've begun to do that tonight. And thank you, Karen and Michael.
Yeah,
and Nancy, how about that? Because when we listened to Mike, and he told us that he's been scared since the election, obviously he's listened and analyzed and done his own work. We heard from a candidate, and we played it earlier this hour, who said on the facts, on the record, that he wasn't going to cut Medicaid,
Right.
although that's clearly what this bill does.
Right.
So obviously something's come through here between the promises the president made and what is in this health care bill.
I'm so overwhelmed at Mike and Karen, I don't even really know what to say. I mean, for starters, that anybody could think the kind of care that he gets and that his mom supports him in getting is a luxury and not something that is his right as a human being, I just find appalling. I echo what Joan said. I'm really confused about what kind of country we are. We're revealed by how we treat our most vulnerable citizens, and that an inefficient system that profits some people could mean that an earned right, not a gift. I mean, Medicaid and Social Security, they're not gifts. These are things that we earn. That something like that could be denied someone like Mike, who has thrived and used it and is able to express himself, to not have a chance for his voice to be expressed is just criminal. It's criminal.
Karen, did you want to respond to any of that? And I did also want to ask you what you thought of some of the activists we showed that did get some attention there, the folks, well, some of whom said they were activists and some of whom said they're just people who happen to use this type of health coverage that were there outside Senator McConnell's office.
That was a display yesterday that I never imagined I would see in this country. And I asked myself the same question, where are we? What kind of people would have them dragged out of wheelchairs? Because people in wheelchairs are still fragile. You have muscles that have not been used. You have bones that have not borne weight. If you don't know how to really pick someone up, to move them from their chair, you can harm them, you can hurt them. And I know that some of the people were hurt yesterday. It was a display that I found to be absolutely unacceptable. And I was on the verge of anger and tears the entire day. I never thought I would see that in this country, ever.
And Andy, while I have you here, the other question I wanted to pose is, what do you say to backers of health care reform and some of the Republican backers of this bill who say they're not against the recipients of these programs? They're certainly, they say, not against patients in America, but they say the overall system cannot hold and that you have to revert things back to the states and have state-level reform. What do you, as someone who's run these programs, what do you say to that argument?
Well, I would say a couple of things. First of all, we have a commitment in our country that we made in 1965 that wasn't a partial commitment. It wasn't a halfway commitment. It was a commitment to people that when they need medical care and they're in the straits that we're talking about, that we would get them to them. And we're a country that can afford that. And as a matter of fact, the Medicaid program costs about 28% less. All things considered, it even costs 28% less than a commercial insurance plan, and its medical cost growth is negligible. So yes, it costs our country more money to cover more people. Of course it does. But Medicaid is an incredibly efficient program, and it's doing wonderful things. And if we can imagine a greater national priority that we would rather fund, whether it's a wall or some other thing, then I think we're going to have to take that to the American public. Because the one thing I will say, and I think Karen said this very well, there was no mandate in this election to take health care services away from people like Mike and 70 million other people on Medicaid. That was not part of this election. So I think we have to basically, if we want to have that debate, I think we're happy to have that debate, and I think there's no two better people than Karen and Mike to be participating in that debate.
We're almost out of time for what we've devoted to have this discussion. I'm so appreciative of everyone for being a part of it. And I know, Nancy, you said you had one more question for Karen, so go ahead.
Yeah, just very quickly, Karen, I'm wondering, what do you think is the disconnect between your elected representatives and where you stand? I mean, they're elected to represent your needs. Why do you think we're at this juncture right now?
Because all they want is budget predictability, and there is no predictability in healthcare. Just as I said with my Mike, his needs have increased over time, his care has increased over time, and that's what Medicaid is there for. You know, all of us are one job loss or one economic downturn. In Florida, one hurricane, it would put, and this is from FEMA, approximately 2,700 people on the rolls of Medicaid. If you had a widespread, storm, it would put tens of thousands. Now, where are they going to get their health care? This lifeline, this safety net is in place for a reason. And to me, this bill is nothing more than, it's not just cuts to Medicaid. They want to decimate Medicaid. And budget predictability and flexibility are words that they use. We have flexibility in our Medicaid state plans. What they want to take away are our rules, regulations, and our rights.
Karen Clay, thank you so much for sharing with us your story. Mike Phillips, I really appreciate what you wrote, what you said, your eloquence, and Andy Slavitt, thank you. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank, of course, Joan and Nancy as well. I appreciate it. Thank you all.